And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Australian Indian Radio's daily life update. Hey, 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 it's first of June. Well, the cooler months are here, but of course, as we know, with it, it brings about the time when we must get ready for text time. We'll start planning right now. But right now, not about text, we're going to talk about games, and it's going to happen right here, starting with the first match in Queensland, but it's not going to be Brisbane. For the first time, it's game time, an announcement by our Premier. And Premier, we're ready to go. We really are ready.
That's all we need to do, isn't it? Hooray! Facebook Live. Okay, well, good afternoon, and of course in breaking news we are absolutely delighted that Townsville is the site for the first State of Origin. This is tremendous news, the first time that a State of Origin has been held in a regional city. I'm quite sure we can hear the cheers from Townsville at the moment down here in Brisbane, but this is wonderful news. I am so excited. We're going to see that stadium packed to the brim, and I know how much that stadium is supported by families and supporters of NRL right across regional Queensland, from Mackay to Mount Isa, from Cairns, all around Townsville. Everyone is going to come and support this historic moment for the city. I really want to thank the NRL and thank Andrew and Peter. I know this has been tough, especially with what's happening down in Melbourne, but honestly there is no better place than Queensland, and it's going to be fantastic that it's going to be held in Townsville. So if you haven't booked your tickets yet, or hop in your car, you're going to be there. It's going to give, the whole city is going to celebrate this once in a lifetime opportunity. Deputy Premier?
Thanks, Premier. Every Queenslander knows that Origin is the biggest game of the greatest game of all. It's been played a lot of places, Melbourne, Perth, even LA, but it's never been played in regional Queensland. And where else would you go than Townsville? A rugby league mad town with a fantastic new stadium. Go the Maroons.
Cameron?
Well, treasurers don't smile very often, but today I'm happier than a JT laugh. This is the moment that North Queenslanders have been waiting generations for. And if the New South Wales Blues think it's difficult coming to Brisbane, wait till they get to Townsville, the cauldron of the North.
Sterling?
Thank you, Premier. And I want to acknowledge the work that we've done with the NRL to bring State of Origin 1 to Queensland Country Bank Stadium, to Townsville's own fantastic North Queensland Stadium. And it is genuinely rugby league heartland. That's why this will be one of the greatest ever State of Origin games, one of the greatest ever State of Origin events. Really looking forward to it, but particularly wanted to say, go Maroons.
Queenslander. Any questions?
Do you hope it sets a precedent for future Origins, more games in the region?
Look, honestly, to have it in Townsville is just an opportunity that I think everyone's going to grasp with both hands. And when we're showcasing our beautiful stadium up there and the people, of course, it is going to be, I think, an opportunity that we're going to see more and more events held there.
How much money will this inject into the local economy in Townsville?
My understanding is over $7 million, but it's going to be a lot more, Jack, because we're going to have people from all around the region coming into Townsville. I don't think there's going to be a spare room left in anyone's house when it comes to State of Origin on June the 9th.
How much should the Queensland government tip into securing this event, and does it outweigh the benefits that you just explained?
You can't put a price on backing regional Queensland.
So, as the Premier says, that you can't put a price on backing regional Queensland, and of course it is a great moment, and where the Blues will get a lot of boos out there, because that is a true blue, hard Queenslander country out there. So, and for the first time ever, the first State of Origin match is going to be played there. Go the Maroons, yes, really. Well, right now let's go to Melbourne, where there have been 7 new cases reported.
The most heart-wrenching scenes from 2020 repeated.
We wouldn't be human if we didn't say that we weren't concerned.
Leaving many questioning, was anything learnt from last year's deadly mistakes?
Everyone else in aged care who has died from COVID-19 since this pandemic began has virtually died in vain.
There have been 11 new cases in Victoria, 3 in aged care, including a 99-year-old resident from Arcare Maidstone. She's had her first COVID-19 vaccine dose and is being monitored in hospital.
The fact that this outbreak has crept into a number of private residential aged care facilities is obviously of very great concern.
Wastewater is also being tested after a second Arcare worker tested positive. She is not vaccinated, while a worker at the Blue Cross facility in Sunshine has also been infected. Some aged care residents and workers have still not had their first dose. Families of vulnerable Victorians are upset it's taking so long.
That's disappointing. That should have happened. That should have been prioritised. As simple as that.
There is no doubt that this situation is incredibly serious. The next few days remain critical, and I want to be really clear with everyone that this outbreak may well get worse before it gets better.
2 more aged care centres were placed into lockdown as a precaution after staff members worked at multiple private aged care homes, despite the practice being banned in public facilities.
Well, of course, why wasn't the lesson learned? This is the question that everyone's asking, from the last time, should we have known better? Well, what is the federal government's response?
In relation to mandating for aged care workers, that had been previously looked at by the Chief Health Officers of the states along with the Commonwealth, and the Prime Minister and myself have asked the medical expert panel to review that decision. That was not recommended at the time, and we have asked the medical expert panel to review precisely that question. Then in relation to what's called single site workforce, the important thing here is that that has been triggered in non-outbreak times. One of the things which, and I'll ask Michael Kidd to address because of his particular role in chairing the Aged Care Advisory Group, one of the things which has been very strongly reaffirmed is the need to ensure that there are adequate staff resources for resident safety. And so that means that, for example, it is absolutely critical that we can have testing staff move between sites, vaccination staff move between sites, clinical first responders exactly as we are now, the need to cover those that are ill, and the need for surge workforce. So all of those things show the need for flexibility. Having said that, the advice we have is that in the Greater Melbourne region, for example, it's approximately 4.7% of staff who have worked across different sites.
So there you go. Well, people who have worked the staff who have worked across different sites, and of course, the lessons that were supposed to be learned from last time. Well, of course, the number of cases, 11 new cases, that's a bit of a worry. Now, let's get a view from our epidemiologist.
The Health Minister said mandatory vaccinations for healthcare workers in these aged care facilities is being looked at. This is a two-part question, really. Are you surprised this wasn't mandated, and should it be mandated?
I was very surprised, Patricia. It has to be mandated. I believe people should have a choice, but not when they work with vulnerable people, disabilities, and patients, and they work in a quarantine facility. They have to be tested. They have to be vaccinated. If they really have a problem with vaccines, and there is now a choice with the Pfizer, and they don't want to be vaccinated, then the authorities need to offer them a job outside the industry, because it's too important. You have a period of being asymptomatic where you're highly infectious, and you start to become infectious a couple of days before symptoms. So you could be caring for somebody, thinking you're safe, but you're not.
But you are not. Well, that's right. So, all the frontline workers, especially in the aged care facilities, had to be vaccinated. And as he mentioned that, and if anyone had a problem, they would be given a job elsewhere within the facility and not to carry directly for the vulnerable people. And the same goes for, flights and everything like that. Of course, if the vaccination was handled properly. So federal government is facing a bit of scrutiny over that as well.
100 days into the vaccine rollout and winter starting tomorrow, a long wait not deterring these Melburnians.
It's something that needs to be done to keep the community safe.
We thought we'd come down this morning even though it's 3 degrees. Just want to get in and out. Yeah.
More than 630,000 COVID shots were administered nationally the past week, but some critical frontline staff are still waiting.
The aged care workforce have only been given the leftovers from a site visit from the Commonwealth.
Victoria knows only too well how lethal COVID is to our most vulnerable. 655 aged care residents died in last year's outbreaks. The virus often spread by staff working across different sites.
This latest outbreak in aged care is a direct result of Scott Morrison's gross negligence and dangerous complacency.
A Commonwealth directive preventing aged care workers completing shifts at multiple homes was dropped late last year.
It's not clear to me the basis on which the government decided that that was no longer necessary in November.
The order reinstated for Greater Melbourne late last week by the Chief Medical Officer, but only for a fortnight.
He acted once he saw.
And, at a time like this, I think, you need to rise above party politics and look at what's best in the interest of the nation and in the interest of all the vulnerable people, and common sense should prevail.
The race against time in Melbourne as health authorities scramble to prevent another aged care disaster.
A second aged care facility is in lockdown in Victoria after a staff member tested positive to coronavirus.
It's thrown the timeline of Victoria's 7-day circuit breaker lockdown into question.
This is the nightmare we thought we'd never see again. The virus has yet again spread to residential aged care. An infected worker, still a mystery case, has passed it to an elderly resident and to a fellow worker who, contrary to the guidelines, was also working in another nursing home.
So there you go. Here it fest there, and So what has it been? Has it been incompetence, negligence, or what?
We lost 655 older Australians during this last COVID outbreak in Victoria. And I just cannot believe that Scott Morrison and a range of decisions that he has made have led us to this point again, where we're now seeing again COVID in nursing homes. If I can just tell you, PK, the reason that this affects me so greatly is because I've visited nursing homes where COVID was rife during that last outbreak, and what the residents and the staff went through is nothing short of utterly traumatic. They lost lifelong friends. Staff in aged care homes were not able to hug their children or have a family dinner for weeks on end. And I vividly remember one resident welling up and talking to me about how every time he got a scratchy throat during that period, he literally thought, this is it and I'm about to die. So the fact that this is happening is just an unmitigated act of total negligence by the federal government, and I'm very upset about it.
What's your reaction?
And of course, she is upset, and it is, as in her words, total negligence by the federal government. Well, all this uncertainty, everything like that, what's it doing to the business community?
Victoria locked down. With it, this sports medicine and fitness business in Melbourne.
We had over 350 appointments scheduled for this week across our 3 sites. We'll be doing well to transition 25% of those online.
But costs, like staff and rent, don't change. Estimates of the economic hit to the state range from $700 million to double that. Treasurer Tim Pallas asked the federal government to reinstate JobKeeper for a week, or to match its $250 million support package. He says both were turned down.
Out of frustration, I said, well, tell us what you're prepared to do. And the simple answer is they're not prepared to do anything.
Each lockdown
means it becomes harder and harder for some businesses to keep going.
I mean, if we can do support around other emergencies and disasters, which happens, we've actually got to look at that now.
This is Victoria's fourth lockdown since the pandemic began. But with breaches from hotel quarantine resulting in lockdowns in Queensland, Western Australia and Victoria twice this year, the issue is unlikely to go away.
We need to have a situation where the federal government steps up and puts support on the table. There is simply no excuse for not doing so.
Business wants certainty.
We need state governments and federal government to work together on this to ensure that there are clear lines of support for business to get through this.
This is not the end of it. We need to learn how to live with it. There's a lot of unknowns and it's extremely difficult to operate.
And as he mentioned that this is not the end of it and that we will have to learn to live with it, and that is quite true, that we'll have to live with it. It's going to be here. So, policies need to be mandated and come forward with those things in mind, that this is going to be here. So plan ahead, plan accordingly, so that the businesses and do not suffer. And of course, as soon as the businesses go down, there goes a lot of jobs as well. Well, let's hear from Melbourne's Lord Mayor Selika.
Lord Mayor, thanks for your time this evening. Is the mood in Melbourne now different to when Melbourne's long lockdown was called last year?
Lee, there are many similar feelings, as you can imagine, a sense of despondency and despair, frustration, anxiety. I think this time there are a couple of things. For a lot of business owners, they're really concerned how often can they bounce back from these lockdowns to keep their doors open and to keep Melburnians in jobs. And I think that sense of resilience is really being worn down and something we have to be very mindful of this time around.
Is there any sense of frustration among Melbourne business owners that for the past year, New South Wales Health has repeatedly managed outbreaks without closing the entire city of Sydney, and yet the Victorian government is either unwilling to do that or unable to do that? Melbourne businesses must be wondering, why is that so different?
Well, there are always lots of ideas given in situations like this, Lee, on how it could be different. I think during the long lockdown last year, we consistently called for a hotspots approach to outbreaks. But we do have to listen to the advice of health experts. We do have to adhere to the restrictions put in place by the Victorian government. From our perspective, every conversation we're having with traders and residents is about how quickly and safely we can come out of this lockdown and open our city up again.
How safely can that be done? And of course, what about the damage that's already been done to a lot of businesses who have suffered a lot of loss? So, they have to comply with the state regulations and of course the directive that comes from the federal government, the health department as well. So that's a lot of things that have to be taken into account in formulating those policies. Well, okay, moving away from that topic now, which has been dominating for this morning session, let's look at the Australian visa system, as there's been a lot of talks within the community, and of course people are a bit worried. There's the number of international students coming into the country has actually stopped. So that takes a big hit in that economy, because the students contributed a fair chunk, especially the international students, and there were a lot of infrastructure that had been put in place, a lot of colleges, student accommodations, and other service providers who are all suffering now. So is it time for visa system to be looked at?
Jem Sahin knows what it's like to struggle to find a well-paid job. The Turkish geometric engineer first came to Australia 5 years ago and had to initially work as a tradie.
I was basically sometimes crying in the shower. What I am doing here, but why did I came? But I was always say, one day I will reach my goal.
He finally did reach his goal of finding a job in his field, and is trying to build a life in Melbourne.
Luckily, my company is going to sponsor for me for permanent residency, and after that, I'm going to apply for citizenship because I love Australia.
Australia's permanent migrant intake is capped, Skilled workers make up the largest share of who comes to the country, with almost 80,000 places each year. The Grattan Institute says Australia should stop offering permanent visas for certain jobs. Instead, it wants employers to be allowed to sponsor anyone, provided they get paid the average full-time minimum wage. That, it says, could generate an extra $9 billion in personal income tax receipts.
Changes in the permanent intake recently have shifted us away from selecting younger, skilled people who earn high incomes in the labour market and towards older people with poorer English language skills that ultimately bring less to the Australian community.
The Grattan Institute's Brendan Coates says migrants with economic potential should be allowed to stay in Australia.
You're giving up really big benefits as far as the tax that people are going to pay in order to bring in someone who meets some sort of short-term skill shortage.
A spokesman from the Department of Home Affairs said the current skilled migration program is designed to meet Australia's economic, demographic and labour market needs. A parliamentary committee has been asked to consider longer-term issues regarding the program and report back by July. Businesses have also been crying out for younger, highly skilled workers. FinTech Afterpay has hired 600 people in the past 12 months and is looking for more global talent.
One thing that we don't have is this ecosystem just yet of people who have built global businesses over a sustained period of time. A lot of that talent is in Silicon Valley, is in Shanghai, is in London, and there's no reason why those people won't move to Australia if those global opportunities are offered to them.
Historically, immigration has made the biggest contribution to Australia's working population. Bringing in younger, skilled migrants not only slows the rate of our ageing population, but it means more people are working, paying taxes, and growing our economy.
What we've found with COVID is we probably need to rethink temporary migration and we need to rethink the pathways to permanency. When people come here and they make a contribution to Australia, we need to recognise that that contribution has the capacity to go on for many years.
Jem also thinks that Australia's almost 1 million temporary visa holders should be given a pathway to citizenship.
There are still plenty of skilled migrants here which they don't have permanent residency. Lots of people are on student visa or other temporary visas.
What's for certain is that when international borders open, the shape of immigration will look very different.
Yes, it will. And of course, the argument there is that if we can get people who are productive, paying taxes and also contributing to the economy and contributing to the productivity at last, so that's what Australia really, really needs. And of course, we know that there's many fields in which there are, vacancies that need to be filled in as well. And as Afterpay rep said that, some of those expertise are overseas. So, so there's another argument that needs to be had. Well, right now, let's take a good look at our sponsors.
GlobeNet Realty. GlobeNet Realty has been the longest established, trusted and respected agency in its trade area. Washa Chandra, Director of GlobeNet Realty, provides honest and ethical service to her customers. If you are thinking of investing in Brisbane real estate market, or if you are seeking professional property management, then you should contact Usha Chandra today on landline 3865 4466 or mobile 0419 775 416. And for further updates, log on to our website www.globenetralty.com.au. GlobeNet Realty is your own local real estate agency. Situated at Shop 52281 Sandgate Road, Boondall. GlobeNet Realty. Real estate is our world.
And don't forget that tomorrow we have the real estate update with Usha Chandra of GlobeNet Realty. Well, right now we'll go and join, as I promised, the mental health seminar that was held by GOPIO Queensland on the weekend, and let's hear the speech, a very powerful speech from our Lady Mayoress.
I want to also take the time to thank you for all the frontline work you do for your community, especially in Logan. Where would we be without you and your heart? I'd like to acknowledge our MCs today. MCing is not as easy as it looks. It's really hard, and it's a skill. And to have such young professionals as you, congratulations and thank you. I'd also like to acknowledge Mr. Rakesh Sharma, President GOPIO Queensland, Mr. Pradeep Gaur-Azia, President GOPIO Gold Coast, Mr. Shyam Das, President Federation of Indian Communities in Queensland, Mr. Ferreira, Dr. Sarwan Alagawan from the Belmont Private Hospital, Ms. Sonia Kumari from the Queensland Transcultural Mental Health Centre and a speaker, Umesh and Usha Chandra, and Arpet, thank you for your brave story today, but also for your vision of doing this. And I note in my speech here I have been given the task of saying the need for mental health in 2021. The need for the discussions of mental health. Is there a need? There has never been a greater need for discussions, open and transparent, in our community. My husband, the Lord Mayor of Brisbane, runs a multicultural but also youth roundtable. And that youth roundtable draws young people with promising futures, although every young person has a promising future, from all the schools around Brisbane. And he hears their viewpoints and their thoughts about how Brisbane could be better or the direction in which it's going. Over the last couple of years, their number one concern has been the environment. They've been genuinely concerned that we're living on a ticking time bomb. But this year, for the first time, in an unprecedented move, their number one concern, these young people who should be not worrying about this kind of thing, their number one concern was mental health. Now, we heard some of the statistics before, that 1 in 2 of us will suffer from mental illness at one time in our life. 1 in 16 of us is suffering currently from depression. That's clinical depression. 16% of the population is suffering from anxiety. That's roughly 2 million. And you know what really worries me? Our young people are killing themselves in a way that they've never done before. So you're more likely to die or lose your battle with mental illness or depression by suicide by the time you're 40 than any other thing. Not cancer, not falling or accidents, but mental illness. Roughly 9 people per week are taking their lives. They're losing that battle. 7 of those are young men. Should we be talking about this? 3,000 per year. These people. But let's not just think about the people who've lost the fight. Let's think about the ricocheting effects of those deaths, those massive losses on our community. The families, or what they call the suicide survivors, the people who are left behind. So in psychology, they measure the level of trauma against benchmarks in history, such as the Holocaust. The survivors of the Holocaust, that's considered one of the highest benchmarks of trauma that someone can go through. They say that if you are a suicide survivor, that is, the person left behind, that your psychological effects, the trauma that you will feel in your lifetime, is equivalent to that. So let's spare ourselves this. And let's spare these young men and women, or older men and women, from feeling that hopelessness. And the best way that we can do that is to open that dialogue in a way that no one can ignore. We should all be talking about this, and there should be absolutely no shame. If you went to a doctor with an oozing sore on your arm or your leg, would you feel shame about that? So if you have then likewise an oozing sore on your soul or your psyche, why should there be any type of shame? And for anyone in the audience who is currently going through a dark time, I want to say this to you. You will come through it. We've heard how it has transformed people's lives, and not only will you come through it, but you will be bigger and better than ever before and able to talk about it. Darkness is always followed by light. It is an inevitability that every time the sun goes down and the night starts, that the sun will rise again, and we must keep that hope in our community. So thank you so much for having me here today. And I want to congratulate GOPIO for opening this dialogue, for providing this forum into which to honestly discuss mental health. One of the #1 contributors, and what they're saying too, what they're saying is our new generation coming through, and I don't know what they call them. I don't know what the new generation's called. I know that I'm Generation X. What is the new generation? Gen Z. Oh, wow, that sounds like a song. But they said, and this is what they're predicating, that it will be one of the greatest shadow pandemics. That's what we're facing. So we need to retrench, we need to pull back, and we need to do differently. And that's what today is. It's opening that. It's doing things differently. And especially with our multicultural community, who perhaps also has a higher level of that shame attached to it. And so the fact that the Indian community is moving forward, keeping pace, and setting that example, I congratulate you for that today. So ladies and gentlemen, there is no shame. Let's walk in the light, and let's support and love each other, because that's what we need to do here. Best wishes for a very bright future.
Thank you, Lady Mayoress Nina Schreiner, for addressing the crowd and for emphasizing the importance of mental health. Next, it's time.
And of course, what a powerful speech there by Lady Mayoress. As I said, we will bring to you glimpses of the event at different times. Right now, it's time to say goodbye from this segment, and it's been wonderful having your company. Until tomorrow, it's goodbye from me. Have a wonderful rest of today, but most importantly, stay safe.